So, there you are. I was informed that you arrived this morning. I am John, and you have made quite the trip all the way out here just to speak to me. Of course, I can understand that. There are not many of us left who lived and were taught under the Master's feet. They tell me that you are a cousin of Philip's. I will try and not hold that against you. I say that in jest. Philip was a credit to God's kingdom. His life was a living example of faith. Go ahead. Pose your questions. I will do my best to answer them for you. Ah, yes, the Napkin of Christ. The napkin is without doubt a fine example of a wordless, silent sermon, an action based upon tradition and culture that speaks a message unto itself. Now the Romans had been skillfully maneuvered by the religious leaders to strike the shepherd, to harm Jesus, and the sheep were scattered. The disciples and followers of Jesus had run and hid in fear. As you know, I was present while the Lord suffered upon the cross. It's not that I was any more brave than our brethren. It's just that I happened to be comforting Mary, Jesus' mother. The Romans, barbaric as they were, simply just left me alone because I was with Mary. The tradition is to allow the family before the cross to not only see the suffering of the condemned, but also the pain and anguish of the family. The Romans view this as a deterrent. Coming before Pilate was Joseph of Arimathea, who was on the ruling council. Along with him was the teacher Nicodemus, who was each a Pharisee and a member of the Sanhedrin. These two men of God's law were well respected. They were well versed in the scriptures, and they had witnessed the miracles and words of Jesus and were secretly believers. Together they petitioned Pilate for the body of Jesus so they could properly bury him. After gaining Pilate's permission, the two went immediately and bought a long strip of linen, and then they came and took the body of Jesus away. Nicodemus also brought the traditional mixes of myrrh and aloes, about 75 to 100 pounds worth. These spices were used according to Jewish burial customs that they had learned from the Egyptians many years before, of wrapping the body and preparing it for burial. Close by to the place where Jesus was crucified was a garden, and in that garden was a new tomb. No one had ever been laid in that tomb before, and that is where they placed the Lord Jesus. While the Lord's body was being prepared to be laid to rest, those who feared Jesus the most, the ones who had conspired to have him crucified, fearing for the loss of their power, they too also went before Pilate and convinced him to place a Roman guard at the tomb and to seal it. That way anyone who breaks the seal would incur the wrath of the Roman Empire. After 3 days, at the conclusion of the Sabbath, Mary Magdalene, Mary mother of James, Joanna, and Salome went to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body with perfume and spices.
Fear not ye, for we know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen.
Now I'd like to point out a few things. First, that us as believers, we didn't even know that the tomb of Christ was guarded and sealed, because my mother and Mary Magdalene and the other women took the spices to anoint the body and were wondering amongst themselves how they were going to remove the stone. And make no mistake about that stone, and as to why it was rolled away. It was not rolled away for Jesus to come out. It was for us to go in and see that he had risen. Jesus is fully human, but he is also fully the deity of God, which means he can appear and disappear anywhere as he pleases. Also, the Lord Jesus once informed Peter that while his body lay in death for 3 days, his spirit descended down to hell. Not that he had any sin, but some say that he took the sins of the world that were placed upon him down to hell and left them there. The Lord had Peter record that he then preached unto the spirits that were imprisoned there since the days of Noah and the time of the flood. Upon seeing and hearing all that they had at the tomb, some of the women began to run, each in joy and fear. Mary Magdalene, however, went to the tomb to see for herself. First the Lord appeared to her, and then he also appeared in the flesh to the women fleeing. Jesus then asked the ladies to go tell the disciples all they had seen and heard, and also to tell them that he would meet them in Galilee, and he left them with a message. I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. The women did as the Lord Jesus had instructed them to do. They sought out and found us his apostles, and told us everything they had seen and heard. Peter and I raced through the tomb to see for ourselves. Upon arriving, we found it empty, with the strips of linen that Jesus was buried in wrapped there undisturbed, and the napkin off by itself folded neatly. Then Simon Peter came, following him John, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, John, who had reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. It's a miracle. I do believe that he arose. Now about that napkin, my friend. You see, in my culture, when one left the table for whatever reason and intended to return, you folded your napkin and placed it there. This left the message, I am not finished.